It's a long-standing St. Patrick's Day tradition. A bowl of shamrock is presented to the US President by the Irish Taoiseach. But this year, there was more at stake, with Donald Trump seemingly intent on tearing up relationships with old allies. So, will this alliance stand the test, or has the luck of the Irish just run out? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, President Trump has hosted Micheal Martin at the White House as part of this year's St. Patrick's Day celebrations. The Irish Taoiseach was the first global leader to visit Trump at the Oval Office since President Zelensky's explosive encounter there. So, with threats of tariffs in the background, did Martin do enough to smooth over relations?
The annual ceremonial, handing over a bowl of shamrock to the US President, is usually the high point of Irish diplomacy. It guarantees Ireland access to one of the most powerful offices in the world. But this year, Taoiseach Micheal Martin had to tread softly following Trump's tariff threats.
Ireland likes to trade with the United States, and the United States likes to do business with Ireland because we are strong and reliable partners. Mr. President, let's do even more and better together.
But the US President was not holding back from setting a hard line.
Is Ireland taking advantage of the US?
Of course they are. I have great respect for Ireland and what they did, and they should have done just what they did. But the United States shouldn't have let it happen. We had stupid leaders. We had leaders that didn't have a clue.
US pharma and tech companies are benefiting from Ireland's lower tax rates, something Trump is threatening to challenge. It's estimated that the US had a trade deficit in goods with Ireland of around 80 billion euros last year. It's believed that 10,000 undocumented Irish immigrants live in the US. Trump's crackdown on illegal migration could affect them too. So, was Micheal Martin's trip a success in helping to strengthen ties across the Atlantic?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Donegal in Ireland, we have Noone. She's a lawyer and a former Fine Gael politician. From Helsinki in Finland, we have Eoin McNamara. He's a research fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. And in Washington, D.C., we have Allie Renison. She's Associate Director at SEC Newgate, UK, and a former advisor to the UK government. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Catherine, to you first. Micheal Martin is back now from the United States. He had to walk quite a diplomatic tightrope for a few days there. Give us your assessment of how he did with President Trump.
I think he probably did as well as could be expected. It's walking into a very unpredictable situation for any politician or diplomat. So, I think some people might have liked him to bring up certain issues for discussion, and I don't think that was probably realistic from Micheal Martin's perspective. I think he navigated the waters that he was in pretty well, considering what he was dealing with, really. I think that's probably as strong as I could put it.
Ali, give us your impression then of how the Irish delegation navigated their way through the minefield that now is the White House.
Well, I think that they benefited from the fact that this was done around lead up to St. Patrick's Day. There's a lot of goodwill towards Ireland across, it's a bipartisan goodwill in Washington. It was interesting to see that there was a sort of question around, the trade aspect, which I think Trump had a very direct answer to, couched in kind of his dislike of the EU and it being a competitor. And there was some discussion, obviously, around the degree to which pharma companies from the US and tech companies have sort of based themselves in Ireland. But I thought Micheal Martin navigated it quite well by pointing out that investment and trade now between the US and Ireland is very much a two-way street.
Eoin, just on that point then, spell out for our viewers how big the relationship is for Ireland with the United States, because we do an awful lot of business with America.
Yeah, I think it is very, very, very important. In Ireland, Ireland really relies a lot on US multinationals in the tech sector, in the pharmaceutical sector, and Ireland's very large budget surpluses in recent years have been or been on account of large corporation tax windfalls from these sectors. And these sectors have boomed in recent years. So it looks like there's a slowdown on the way. We'll have to see, and a lot of that will be determined by Trump's wider economic policies and his relations with the European Union. So Ireland and EU policy, and can Ireland be this mediator or this transatlantic bridge? I think maybe Micheal Martin's visit was surprisingly maybe a positive step in that direction, but there's still a lot of uncertainty left.
Catherine, just on the point of the EU, Trump has spelled out he pretty much detests the European Union. He says it was set up to hurt America, and Ireland loves the EU. We've done very, very well out of the European Union. So it's a bit of an awkward one to navigate, isn't it, for Ireland?
Yeah, it's a tough one. We do have a very special relationship with the US, just to kind of continue on from what Eoin was saying there. It's very deep. Irish people really, they're a massive influence in the States generally, and, are said to have built America to a large degree, certainly Boston, New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and many other cities. And you can't understate how strong the Irish lobby, for want of a better word, would be in the States. So, for us, it is awkward. We have we are very good friends with the US. The peace process in Ireland was helped largely by our friends in the US. A lot of congressmen and senators got involved in a very positive way to affect peace in Ireland over the years. And we're very grateful to them, and there is a very good relationship between us. So for us to be interlocutors between the EU and the US, we do have a unique situation with the US. And, this wasn't just facilitated or helped by the fact that it was St. Patrick's Day. It was arranged on St. Patrick's Day and around St. Patrick's Day, and has been for years. And it's the envy of a lot of other countries, the fact that we can do that. So we are uniquely placed. But as to whether Trump will, he has his own agenda. He doesn't want to hurt Ireland, but he's clearly dissatisfied with the imbalances as he sees it. He has a very protectionist view of global economics. So, there's a certain unpredictability that Ireland should be able to help with. But again, there's a lot of unpredictability.
Allie, to you, so we've seen the Taoiseach Micheal Martin display exemplary diplomatic skills, got on very well in the White House, came away smiling, and then in walks Conor McGregor, this extremely controversial UFC fighter who has made incredible headlines in Ireland over the last few years, and not for good reasons. How surprised were you to see McGregor welcomed so warmly by Trump?
To be honest, I wasn't surprised at all. I think there is, President Trump mentioned in his press conference that he sort of likes and admires Conor McGregor. He's probably seen as a sort of strongman representative of Ireland. And the fact that his visit was on St. Patrick's Day, in some ways, I don't think it was an entire surprise as a follow-on. It's interesting to see that, obviously Conor McGregor was given a platform to talk as well about his views on the Irish government's approach on immigration policy. I think that's a little bit more of a delicate issue to have put forward for the Irish government to deal with.
Catherine, to you then, in all your years in Irish politics, how problematic is someone like Conor McGregor being given a global platform by the President of the United States to start talking about immigration and government issues?
Yeah, I mean, it blows my mind, really, to be quite frank. And we're all really upset. Well, most of us in Ireland are very upset at the idea of Conor McGregor being perceived to be representing us. And that will be the perception by certain people, that he somehow has a mandate, which of course he doesn't. I don't know how seriously people take Conor McGregor, and the backlash has been pretty intense in Ireland. So as to whether, people who don't tend to understand fully what's going on and tend to latch on to headlines, they're the people who will potentially use Conor McGregor's words as fodder. But I wouldn't be too concerned about anyone taking him too seriously in terms of the geopolitical situation.
And Catherine, he certainly takes himself very seriously, McGregor, because we know the Irish president, Michael D. Higgins, will be stepping down in November. There will be a presidential election, and McGregor has made no bones about the fact that he would like to be Ireland's next president. How would you feel about that if he were to run?
Well, I wouldn't be a bit concerned, Enda. I mean, it might make it into a bit of a circus, but if there's one thing that has unified Irish people in the recent past is their dislike and disdain for Conor McGregor. So I think the likelihood of him being elected president of Ireland is, you know, I wouldn't like to have any money on him, put it that way. I don't think he has any chance of being elected in this country, thanks be to God.
Eoin, to you, how did you feel as an Irish person seeing McGregor pop up in the White House on St. Patrick's Day?
I was disappointed, but I wasn't surprised. I'm not a big UFC fan. I would have preferred the other Irish sports star that Trump referenced in his meeting with the Taoiseach last week, Rory McIlroy. But McIlroy was, of course, too busy winning the Players' Championship down in Florida to be at the White House on St. Patrick's Day. But on McGregor and Trump's politics, I think the UFC and Trump have been very useful for each other. I remember in the days after Trump won the election late last year, we saw him parading into Madison Square Garden with Joe Rogan and with Dana White. And we saw at his inauguration, he praised his son Barron, saying like Barron made all the right calls. He told me I needed to go on to Joe Rogan's podcast. So this very much connects with Trump's base, that there's a delusioned set of white males, younger white males, that idolize people, the strongman of Trump and the strongman of McGregor. And a lot of them seem to coincide also with the UFC's core audience. And politically, of course, the UFC and Trump's association with it gives him that image to project his strongman credentials. If we think back to those scenes in Madison Square Garden of him parading in front of the crowd like that. And McGregor's very much the same, grandstanding as the strongman. And yeah, I would agree with Catherine. I think he will find it very, very difficult if he tries to run as the president of Ireland. But there is a fringe of society, younger white males, maybe less educated, disillusioned with the way society is working, seeing that society doesn't work for them, who identify with strongmen like this. So and that is building. So that is something we need to keep an eye on. Of course, it has become very prominent in the Trump phenomenon, in the MAGA phenomenon in the United States. Will we see it more in Ireland in the coming years? That's a question we'll need to find out.
Allie, you're in the States. Just give us your reading of Trump inviting Conor McGregor into the White House.
I think there's probably a less degree in terms of level of shock, because I don't think, beyond perhaps the first or second generation Irish American community, that people, to be honest, are all that aware of the case that was happening in Ireland. So I think they just see it effectively as an extension of Trump surrounds himself with and coincides with the sort of the same kind of people. It's just a sort of an extension of the persona that they associate with the White House currently.
Catherine, back to the money side of things. So Ireland last year exported 72 billion euros worth of goods to the US. 58 billion euros of that was drugs and medicines. This is a huge kind of earner for Ireland. How concerned should the Irish government be if he does start looking at putting tariffs in or telling these pharma companies to come make their products in the United States?
I think we are definitely concerned as a nation about that. We have a very open economy, as you know, Enda, and we are a global economy. We're very anti the type of policies that Trump, anti in the sense of our philosophy and everything around our policies is the opposite. So we're very open and as a result vulnerable. So, the pharma industry is huge in Ireland, and Ireland isn't just attractive from a tax perspective. It's a very attractive location in Europe. It's a very talent, there's a huge amount of talent in Ireland. We have obviously English as our mother tongue. And, there are a lot of reasons why companies locate here, aside from tax. The tax is important. So we're concerned, but we've always been a very adaptive, very, sensitive economy. And I've always been very impressed with the capacity of Irish people to pivot when necessary. So whatever needs to be done from a government, from civil service, from a business perspective, we tend to work together. I come from the west of Ireland, a county called Mayo, and Mayo people during the famine, they went to London, they went to New York, they went to Chicago, they stuck together, they worked together. Irish people have that hard-working approach, and that still applies to us very much. We will survive whatever tariffs he decides to impose on Europe, and we'll pivot in a way that we have to, and we can do a lot of work perhaps with Canada. There's a new prime minister coming there, and he's a Mayo man apparently, and he's already done Ireland a lot of good in the past when he wasn't prime minister. So, we'll look to other countries for our trade. We'll pivot.
Eoin, to you, can you see Ireland successfully navigating its way through any Trump tariffs then? Because this is not just rivers of money, this is oceans of cash.
They will hit Ireland quite hard if they are levied on the EU, because, of course, Ireland's very strong economic link to the United States would make that inevitable. But we have scope to mediate in this regard. One other issue beyond the economic issue that hasn't been mentioned is defence. Of course, Trump has been very, very hard on other EU member states and the EU as a whole on defence. He's often criticised Germany under his narrative that Germany has free-rided off the US for its defence, and indeed may even owe the US money for defence provided in the past by the US to Germany. Ireland is one of the lowest spenders on defence within the EU, if not the lowest, and is actually very vulnerable. And Trump is wheeling back NATO's Article 5, is wheeling back defence provisions in Europe, and all that will affect Ireland as well. As the EU scrambles for resources to shore up its own defence, it will be asking Ireland, what is it doing to respond to its vulnerabilities? And Ireland may not be able to rely on its neighbours anymore to shore up these critical vulnerabilities which impact Ireland's economy, such as undersea infrastructure, Ireland's aviation corridors. Ireland will have to think about doing more there, and it's quite a controversial issue between Ireland and the EU at the moment, I would say. But of course, Trump did not bring this up, as he might have with other EU member states. And it shows again the power of Irish America and the Irish American lobby and Irish soft power. But that will only go so far. These vulnerabilities, these threats have not gone away since the smiles in the White House last week.
Allie, to you, President Trump sounded like he had almost grudging admiration for how the Irish have done business with America over the years. And he used the phrase that the Irish had been clever and very smart. Do you think we're kind of in danger of running out of road under this president?
I mean, yeah, he said obviously in the press conference that, he would do the exact same. I mean, it's interesting that when he talks about barriers and the possibility of, unfair trade being tackled. Well, if you were to take, for example, Ireland's very competitive corporation tax rate, that's not really an unfair trade barrier. That's a unilateral sovereign economic decision, which the US could do as well if they wanted to help attract manufacturing investment back into the US. I think that he's certainly got Ireland in the frame because he understands that there's a lot of, for example, pharmaceutical exports from Ireland to the US. It'd be interesting to see how the actual retaliation, if that makes sense, goes, because obviously the EU was one of the few, if only, trading partners after steel and aluminium sort of tariffs were put on US imports from other countries to do that sort of response. And Trump then threatened to do sort of, 200% across a sort of whole sweeping range of goods. But actually, the way in which tariffs work is that if you are retaliating effectively to another country's retaliation, you can do that country by country. And we've seen that before, that when the US has responded to sort of EU sort of punitive and sort of responsive measures. Sometimes the further tariffs from the US are done on country by country basis. So maybe that's an opportunity for Ireland to be spared, or maybe it puts them more in the frame. And the last thing I'd say on that is that certainly on pharmaceutical exports, which have just sort of continued to increase from Ireland to the United States in recent years, there is a sort of general consensus that you don't put tariffs on really critical medical supplies. The question is how broad does that sort of exemption extend to, and whether sort of Trump is willing to carry on with that convention.
Catherine, just spell out for us how different life is now from Ireland's perspective under Trump as president, when previously Joe Biden, we know his ancestors came from County Mayo, where you're from. He had great affinity for Ireland. He'd been in and out of Ireland on family holidays for many, many decades. You know, is there a fear that we're dealing with a president really who doesn't care that much about Ireland?
I think he cares more than he might let on. You know, he has his golf club and hotel in the west of Ireland, and he's very fond of it. He said that in the press conference. I think genuinely he does admire. He's worked with Irish people in his business over the years in New York and elsewhere, and I think he has there's mutual respect, say, between him and Irish business people that he's met over the years. So, yeah, he's no Biden, he's no Kennedy. You know, he's a really unusual president. And, you know, if we have a capacity in Ireland, it is to just make the best of the situation we're in. And I think that's what we have to do. We'll get as close to the administration as we can. And, yeah, it is radically different to what we've experienced in the past, but it is what it is.
Eoin, is Trump right when he says that these American companies who are making huge profits overseas globally but not paying their tax to the American Treasury? I mean, if Ireland had a situation where there were Irish companies making colossal amounts of money and paying taxes in, say, the UK or Australia or Switzerland, wherever, the Dublin government would probably be hopping mad, wouldn't they?
Yeah, sure. But you've got to look at the context. Ireland is a very small state that has historically struggled with immigration and unemployment. The United States is a superpower and a lot of its power is based in the free trade system. So the United States really in that regard has to lead by examples. There are trade-offs, but the US benefits a lot more from this liberal, open, free trade system. It benefits a lot more than it is at a disadvantage. So that is something that Donald Trump doesn't really seem to understand, and he thinks he can drive a much better bargain coercively by threatening U.S. allies and threatening them with tariffs and other rhetoric, and in the end, I think that will rebound on the United States. It will cause friction. It'll remove the cohesion between the United States and its allies, and it will leave the United States isolated. It will still be a very powerful country, but it still won't have that platform of its allies as strongly as it would maybe in the past to face down its adversaries. And of course, we are entering an era of renewed strategic competition with the two peer competitors of the United States being Russia and China. And that platform, that multilateral platform of strong allies reinforced by the free trade international system, reinforced by US investment in the global economy. That's been a US strength very much in the past. That is a source of US power. And I think that this is a platform that Donald Trump unfortunately doesn't see, and that could be to the US detriment as the international system evolves into the future.
Allie, final point to you. So just to recap, all in all, a pretty good week for Ireland, but some work to do on managing this relationship. And I'm sure politicians in Ireland will be hoping that President Trump now turns his attention to Canada, Mexico, European Union, pick anyone else but Ireland.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how the country by country analysis that the US government is currently doing on trade, because we know that in about 2.5 weeks time, the kind of much vaunted reciprocal tariff approach that President Trump has trailed is coming into effect. Now, he will have obviously the EU as a whole, but other countries very much in his sights. The one thing I think as well that Ireland probably needs to sort of be mindful of, though, is on tax. So one of the things that President Trump has talked about being unfair is that, countries who've signed up to this OECD tax deal effectively saying that you'll kind of lift your minimum corporate tax rate to 15%. Now, I actually, the Irish government has signed up to that. It hasn't been, I don't think, started to be collecting yet, but it's something that Trump actually sees as an unfair barrier on US companies. Maybe the US companies take a different approach to where they're located. I doubt it, because I think, as Catherine said, Ireland has many strengths beyond just the tax rate to its sort of competitiveness in terms of attracting investment. But yes, I think what happens in a few weeks' time will hopefully shift some of the focus away from Ireland onto other trading partners of the US.
Thanks, Allie, and to Catherine and Eoin as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable, TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.